Talk about throwing him under the bus, Ed. HSCC Road Sports Trophy Race, the finale to a phenomenal weekend of action here at the 2023 Silverstone Festival. Wherever you have watched it from, trackside or from the couch, hopefully this will entertain as well. They did have a wet qualifying session, as you've just heard, but the Lotus Elan of John Davison starts on pole from a slew of bigger engine cars, the Morgan Plus 8s and the Cobra Kivloken starting on row 2, sharing with Nigel Greensell, of course, because it's a race with two drivers, so of course Nigel Greensell is somewhere in there as well. Philip House Escort RS2000 was going well early on in the session before the big engine cars powered past him, and right towards the tail of the field is a car that is worth watching out for, particularly if you're on the spectator banking. 39th on the grid, Alexis Maskell sharing his 911 with Ollie Bryant. So that car might well, having not qualified quickly, make its way through the field. There it is. It is white with blue stripes. Elliot Maskell, as you can see, because that's not a novice cross for Ollie Bryant, unless there's a different Ollie Bryant that I'm not aware of. He's certainly not shown himself to be a novice today. So Elliot Maskell is wearing the novice's cross. He starts that Porsche, and hopefully it'll be in fine fettle to hand over to his more celebrated teammate. Well, Alistair Douglas, after the rain that swept in qualifying, and I mean, when I'm talking rain, we could not see which car was which down the straight in front of us. It got so wet, it made an otter's pocket look dry. This is beautiful racing conditions for these cars as they come out for this race to round out our weekend.
Indeed, yes, and we did comment that some drivers kept on going in the rain, and that might have been a good idea if it had been wet now, because they get used to the track, but actually, thankfully, it's remained beautiful and sunny since we had that shower around about lunchtime. But that final car, Alexis Maskell, is actually a Greek financier despite his name, and Ollie Bryant sharing with him in one of the very early Porsches, the 2-litre cars. And there's a really competitive series runs around Europe for those cars, and that's one of the cars that takes part in that.
Yeah.
But what a mixture of cars. We've got the Morgans both with the big V8 engine, originally Rover based, but more recently they've changed to BMWs and all sorts of different engines in Morgans these days, but also the 4-cylinder Morgans further back in the pack. And then we've got that gorgeous Cobra, which Kevin Kivloken campaign. It's Kevin who starts the race, campaigns regularly. That was actually a works demonstrator car in the States from new, so it was a factory car, and Kevin brought it over to the UK and had it refettled absolutely beautifully, and he's won a lot of races in that, and he's popped Nigel Greensell in as his co-driver as well, as you mentioned. So that's a possible winner of the race, despite starting on the second row. And Steve Deeks' 911, the blue car, that goes well as well. A rear-engined car, rear-wheel drive, so very different handling characteristics to the front-engined rear-wheel drive cars ahead of it.
So we've got lots of Morgans. You see the Mustang in there, 4 Cortinas, Alfa Romeos, Porsche 924s, TVR Tuscans, TVR 2500Ms, the Volvo engined Marcos, but at the front of the field is the Elan S2 of John Davison with a fixed head coupe, and then he's got 3 big V8 muscle cars behind him, the Morgans and Kivloken in that bright blue Cobra with its particularly suitable registration.
And the 2 Morgans, both father and son teams as well. You saw Elliot, whose father Russell will take over, Elliot to start, and William Plant, the son, will hand over to father Richard.
Best of the Porsches, Steve Deeks in 6th position, that orange car, and then the TVR 3000M, as you suggest perhaps from the name, a 3-litre engine in the front of car number 9, Julian Barter, green and gold. That's the fixed head car you can just see behind the second Morgan on the left-hand side. Lime green Lotus Elan, that'll be easy to spot, won't it? That is started by Rupert Ashdown, and Barry will take over that car later on.
That's another father and son, son and father, in fact, Rupert the son. So the father and son teams have chosen the sons to start in this particular occasion.
Sun's starting in the sun. Well, maybe they're hoping that something in there will click in their favour. Nissan 240Z further up the field, and Nissan 260Z further back down in the silver car down towards the tail of the field. So these are based on production road-going sports cars, modified for racing. It is what it says on the tin, road sports. The final race here at the Silverstone Festival 2023. As they come to the line, it is poleman John Davison who will head the field away for the HSCC Road Sports Trophy encounter here at the Silverstone Festival. But here's a little 1600cc twin cam, outgunned immediately by the big V8's Kevin Kivlochen, trying to go down the inside in the Cobra, doesn't make it through. But from the front row of the grid, it's Elliot Patterson's Morgan that takes up the running. Two more Morgan +8s behind. Some confusion towards the tail of the field with cars going off all over the place. Big lock up from the Alan Mann Escort there, car number 5, manages to get it all under control. Philip House, and it is the V8s that are going to make their way through, and Steve Deeks in the orange Porsche will also try and get by the Elan as quickly as possible to stop those front engine V8 cars getting by. So the first of the Morgans has gone by. Here comes Kivlochen down the straight, unleashing the Ford engine. It's the small block Ford, but it's still a lot bigger block than the one in the Lotus Elan. The Lotus carries less speed, less weight rather, and more speed into the corner, but gets on the grass on the inside, avoiding the Cobra, and is down into 3rd place. Steve Deeks up to 4th place from 6th on the grid. He's got ahead of 2 of the pesky Morgans already.
Very appropriate number for Steve Deeks, 911 for his 911 Porsche as they go through Copse Corner for the first time. Elliot Patterson has leapt away in the lead, and an early retirement there. Is that one of the cars that was involved in that little mix-up?
Might well have been.
So it's possible. That's Keith Wyman's, looked like a Mustang 350 fastback.
It was, and it's got tyre marks on the door as well, so somebody else has made contact with him, or he's made contact with somebody else. Steve Deeks knows this track well. In fact, Steve was my instructor when I did my ARDS test here at Silverstone when that was first introduced a couple of years ago, so he knows the track extremely well. And the TVR 3000M, we talked about that car. Great start from Julian Barter. He's got ahead of the 51 Morgan of Simon King, who started a row in front of him, and Barter up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 position, leading the next little gaggle of cars. See another 911 in there, the lime green Lotus, and again the Lotus challenging down the inside. John Davison knows the strengths of that car. I mean, we all know the strengths of that car. It's light, it's nimble, it'll carry speed deeper into the corner than the bigger, heavier engine cars like the Cobra and like the Morgans. But the big problem then, of course, is corners don't always continue all the way round, and so there's a straight, and as soon as you get onto the straight, bye-bye big engine V8s. Here comes the Morgan from 4th place, and this is the Plant family car, trying to get by, doesn't manage to do so. So that's William Plant, car number 79, the 4th car in your queue. And that Morgan +8 trying to squeeze past the Lotus. You're going to have to wait for a little bit longer straight. The Lotus goes by Kivlochen, up to 2nd place. This is where it's best, at home on the tight and twisty stuff, but again another straight awaits, and the 2 V8 cars behind are going to open the taps and try and come at least steaming by before they get to the end of the straight bit.
And John Davison now will be looking in his mirrors, wondering which side the 2 V8 cars will come, and down into Brooklands they come. The leader, Elliot Patterson, turns in. Kivlochen's managed to get by, but not for long, because John Davison nips up the inside again on braking for the left-hander at Brooklands. Now Kivlochen's trying to punch that more powerful car around the outside, but John Davison, having nothing of it, holds the inside line, so he stays in 2nd place as they exit Luffield, go through Woodcote. Now the next problem for John Davison is we've got a long straight, or a longish straight, to Copse Corner. So
long enough.
will the two of them blast by? He stays to the right-hand side of the track to defend his line into Copse Corner, and it works. John Davison stays in 2nd place, Kivlochen 3rd, and in 4th place, the 2nd of the Morgans, that of William Plant.
I think unless you're in a single-seater, you're not getting around the outside of a well-driven Lotus Elan in those tight corners at the end of the lap, or midway through the lap, given where we're starting. Kivlochen under real pressure then from William Plant in the maroon Morgan. And Kivloken hanging on to third place. Steve Deeks is right there now. Deeks doesn't have quite the grunt either that the V8 cars do, but again, that Porsche 911 should be able to keep its own in the tight and twisty stuff. And behind him, the TVR up in 6th position. And it is the Patterson family Morgan that is creeping away at the moment. Fastest first sector of the entire race of anybody for Elliot Patterson at the beginning of the last lap, and that's helped him to set his fastest race lap and to just creep away from the battle for second. And the longer that battle goes on, the Elan versus the Cobra and the Morgan, then the better it is for the Morgan out front. But Davison has made a break, hasn't he? Quite a decisive one. He got through the Beckett's S's quicker, and it looks as though Kevin Kivloken is having to defend hard against William Plant, and that is making the two of them a little slower than they need to be to keep that Elan in touch.
And in fact, the Elan in second place, Davison, with a bit of clear track in front of him as the third and fourth place cars go side by side, and it's going to be a change with William Plant going through on the inside of Kevin Kivloken, and that gives Steve Deeks a chance as well in the orange Porsche number 911 as they go through Aintree and onto the Wellington Straight once again. Just finished what I was going to say about John Davison. He was only 0.15 of a second, 15 hundredths, yes,
right.
Slower than the leader.
I think we're going to see a safety car. That's John Dixon, or I think it's John Dixon walking away from the Lotus Elan, heavily damaged, and that's the 260Z. They've clearly made contact. John Hall's 260Z. That's a long way away. Well, they have both made contact with something. Safety car is coming out. Whether they've made contact with each other or not remains to be seen. We saw a car coming back out of the pit lane. It was 717, Ant Reilly and Jonathan Speak's Lotus Elan, and I thought there was a very pale car involved in the first corner in Broglio, and it might have been them. So the safety car will close down the lead gaps. Good news for Davison, because it closes him up on the Morgan. Bad news for Davison, but it closes his chasers up on him as well. And that Elan is not long for this world. Yeah, he pulls off. What started as a bit of smoke has become really quite a lot of smoke for Thomas Giddings. That's a Series 1 fixed head.
We'd like you to stay off the track, please.
Yes, don't try and make it back to the pit lane.
Dumping oil on
you were in exactly the right place. Stay on the grass and allow them to come and rescue you.
So they'll come round, they've reduced their speed, and obviously now they can't change position with the yellow flags all around the circuit. But, a very, very unhappy driver stomping away from that incident we saw on camera a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
But, we don't know what happened.
Going to need a lift for the 260Z. Definitely going to need a lift for that Elan, or what remains of it. Not sure if the boys caught it on camera. Was that Morgan sitting down at the? Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
On the flat at the front right.
So.
By the way, thanks very much indeed to Ben from the RAC, who has saved our man Ed Foster. Picked up a nail in his tyre on the way back to our hotel yesterday, came out with a flat tyre this morning, and Ben from the RAC took it over to Toaster to Northampton, got it fixed. Well, there's the end of the incident. It does look as though there was a coming together between the Lotus and the Datsun.
And that was the driver I saw stomping away earlier. So
yeah, John Dixon shares it with Amber Dixon, and John clearly not convinced that that was his fault. Obviously, when you get to the steward's room, you will find two different stories. However, it is the right front of one car and the left front of the other. So you sense that is probably where they came together. Now, we didn't see this Mustang stop. This is again, the 350 notchback.
I think this taking an opportunity to move this now.
This was Keith Wyman's car, wasn't it?
That's right, 17,
in that
is it?
kind of bullet Sherwood green colour. Oh dear, a little bit of contact there with the Morgan. And it's kind of 54, Philip Sinclair Tisdall. And That is a full-on Bullet Mustang moment, isn't it? It's not the notchback, it's the fastback. And that is looking a bit more second-hand than Steve McQueen left his.
He ended up hanging over a ditch, didn't he, in Bullet?
Yeah. But at least he didn't drive into the petrol station and explode.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Just an excuse for a big explosion on film.
Well, yeah, one of the world's favourite car chases. Mark Leverett and Will Leverett's Lotus Elan. They do make a good noise. Now, I know the world's most economical induction system is not a pair of Webers, but it's one of the world's best induction systems. You know, you'll pay the price for the fuel just to have that throaty gurgle as you open the throttle and twin 40s. Just inhaling the atmosphere and mixing it with the fuel. Tappity.
A little bit of a clear-up job here, haven't we?
Quite a lot of a clear-up job, I'm afraid, yes. And the HSCC Road Sports have not been blessed with the best fortune here this weekend. They really copped it. The only wet qualifying session in the entire day on Friday. And now what is a relatively brief 40-minute race anyway is probably going to be 10 minutes behind the safety car, possibly a little longer. So we are getting potentially to the moment when we're going to have a pit stop window open with the cars behind the safety car.
4 minutes. The pit stop window open.
We're definitely going to have the pit stop window open behind the safety car. Didn't see that. That car shed a wheel, hasn't it?
That's Rupert Ashdown.
Yeah, that was our Lime Elan.
So
it's
that's
now a Limey Down Elan.
Oh dear.
I know, I'll stop now.
Yeah.
Ah, well, now,
there's
see,
the wheel.
that's the ultimate definition of a collector's car, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have to stop and collect the bits that have fallen off.
Yeah. Not unknown for Elans to lose wheels. Lotuses to lose wheels, as Sterling Moss will tell you in his book, and also in a very amusing interview I did with him a few years ago.
Lotus, of course, the acronym for lots of trouble, usually serious.
So that's not an incident we saw, and that was a car that was running in the top 6.
Yeah.
I think it was 6th or 7th, certainly in the top group of cars. And another new fan for motorsport. That's great to see.
Yeah, brought her parents along.
Yep.
And it is fantastic. And events like this are really what keep motorsport enthusiasm alive, because you know, Formula 1 on TV is all well and good, and a bit of superbikes or a bit of World Rally or watching Le Mans or whatever, but seeing it in person, hearing it in person, feeling it in person, and just enjoying the atmosphere of a race weekend like this is utterly, utterly different. It could be Gordon Murray in a hat. I don't think it was, but it could have been Gordon Murray in a hat.
It looked like it was a shot of the BRDC clubhouse balcony, so it could well have been somebody like that. As the
was that man pocketing my packet of wages? Oh dear, yes. Is that where the Elan was? I think it might have been.
And generations of children, including me, have rolled down the grass banks at Silverstone. I'm sure you did, Martin, when you were younger.
Actually, I didn't come here young enough to be rolling down the banks, but my son has, and I'm sure my grandson has as well over the last couple of years. He's come as a tiddly tot.
My granddaughter did a couple of weeks ago here, and there we have it. Perfect. That's what we used to do when we were children.
It's a classic roly-poly.
We didn't have... is that an electric scooter?
It is.
That's not something that's supposed to be ridden around Silverstone, but quite a convenient way of getting about.
A lot of work to be done on that Datsun, I'm afraid. Considerably shorter on the left front than it started the day. However, there we go. Well, it is a nice evening for motor racing and to finish off the day. And don't forget, when the track goes quiet, the noise does not stop. We've got our music guests coming onto the stage in about 40 minutes from now, actually, at 7:20. The bands will kick off.
And It will be a busy pit lane, as we saw earlier on when the safety car's out. It's 40 seconds until the pit window opens. Oh, another Elan. Oh, Elans aren't doing too well in this race, are they? Mark Leverett and Will Leverett. I think it was Will started, was it? 20.
So definitely living up to their billing, aren't they? That was the twin cam that we were looking at in the pit lane about 5 minutes ago.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, it's Will Leverett did start that.
It made noises when it was stationary and then failed to make noises once it got moving again.
And that's parked up on the outside of Aintree. That is not an ideal place to leave a car.
You're not going to leave that there, I'm afraid.
But there is a gap in the barriers just a little bit further on.
Yeah, not going to get a drive, I'm afraid. Here all weekend, lots of work and preparation on the car to get it here, and the wretched thing won't run properly. It was good as gold on Friday and on Thursday, and probably for weeks beforehand, and that is the joy of owning and running an old car, everybody. And still, we're stupid enough to want to keep on doing it. Keith Arler's waiting for the pit window to open, which it has done. And as ever, kids making their own fun while the track is quiet. So pit window is open and everybody is stood waiting. There's Nigel Greensell, stood standing. And again, I think the safety car will be out for probably another couple of laps, because every time they clean up one offender, another one appears at the side of the track. So we'll wait for the safety car to get round to the pit lane, and then when it does, stand by your beds, because I think everybody will be coming in. And if they don't, and we did see this a little bit earlier in one of the races when there was a safety car out and the pit window opened, if you don't come in when you're given the golden opportunity, then I'm afraid it's your own silly fault. So I do anticipate everybody coming in. I don't see any mileage in not coming in.
But then the leader doesn't.
Well, the safety car's not coming in at the end of this lap, so he does have another opportunity. I'm not sure why you wouldn't take the first opportunity. Lots and lots are going into the pits. There are a number who are not. They've obviously passed various stationary cars that are not yet being attended to and figured, well, I've got all the time in the world. I can't see that there's an advantage to not coming in, other than you hope that there will be many more cars coming in now and therefore many fewer cars in the pit lane. Kevin Kevlocken comes in to hand over to Nigel Greensell. Right, son, there you go. You filled out your damage waiver, full insurance, all yours.
Well, at the pace that the safety car is currently going, it will take about 4.5–5 minutes to get round on one lap. And actually, that's quite close. That will be within 2 minutes of the pit window closing. So it's a bit of a risk to go round again.
Well, the deal there, I'm sure, is that you will point out that you were behind the safety car and had to have another opportunity because the safety car was going slow. I mean, they'll be within 2 minutes of it, so that's still plenty of time.
Okay.
What you don't want to do is not come in second time round, because then really, you know, it's like being caught speeding by a marked police car that sat behind you. You deserve to be done for stupidity as well as speeding, for not slowing down when the marked police car was sitting there or not seeing it. Right, there's the time. Woo, hello. There's the time. That will be a change of position.
Yep, Steve Deeks got ahead of the second of the Morgans.
Now, there are two things going on here. Either you are a little slow being released, in which case you lose time, or you're a little fast being released, in which case you gain a penalty. We'll wait and see exactly how that happens. But Steve Deeks, out behind Nigel Greensell.
And the 79 Morgan, the William Plant, now Richard Plant driven car, lost out there to Steve Deeks as well. Or he lost out to Steve Deeks, and Steve Deeks is much closer to Nigel Greensell.
Well, 2/3 of our field did come in, so those that didn't agreed the pit lane will be less busy. So I didn't see anybody really having major dramas in the pit lane, though, even though there were, 25 cars went in. So they're now, having stopped, making their way back to the tail of the safety car field. The jeopardy now, if you come in behind the safety car, second time around, is that before you get back out, the safety car goes in and everybody else is going more quickly on their out lap than you was. Now, is that like a glider releasing the toe, or was that accidental?
Yeah, it just fell off the toe ring, didn't it?
Or did it pull the toe ring out of the glass fibre, which is just possible. And there's not an awful lot of firmer Lotus at the front there to be able to attach it to. But either way, luckily it was just within reach of the marshals who scamper out. And again, thanks indeed to everybody who has kept the racing going this weekend. Security staff, medical staff, the rescue crews, and particularly the marshals, male and female. It's not just blokes that do it, lots and lots of female marshals as well, right up in the thick of the action and keeping everybody safe. So thank you to all of them.
That Datsun, now known as a Nissan, is in a safe position, so that's being left where it is. Marshals have cleared up the other incident, and the lights are out on the safety car, so this is a disadvantage to the drivers that stayed out.
Yep, big error, big error.
It's 19 minutes remaining in the race, so the pit window is open for another 4 minutes, so they're going to get in, but it's going to be under racing.
Okay, look behind the red Porsche and the red MG. Those are the cars that have stopped and do not need to go into the pit lane, and these cars are now going to lose half a lap to their rivals because they did not come in and gambled that the safety car would stay out later.
So we'll pick up the order after they've been over the line. This car not necessarily in the lead, although it will cross the timing line first after the safety car. But
so we go back to green flag racing. There's a lone Morgan out front being released at the front of the queue. But the cars that have stopped now, here they come. So Morgan leads, and then the Lotus Elan that started on pole position. John Davison remains in it. Nigel Greensall in the blue Cobra. That is the third place car of those that have stopped. And Steve Deeks in the Porsche in fifth position behind 79, which is now Richard Plant in the Plant family car. 173 is a lap or possibly even 2 laps down. The little MG midget. Oh, and contact! The door was not as open there, I'm afraid, as Richard Plant had hoped. That was rather a late lunge from the Morgan driver, and I would think that the MG driver would be feeling rather aggrieved there. Steve Deeks now with a little problem getting back up to speed. Here comes another Morgan from behind. He's going to lose a place there as well, isn't he?
Nigel Greensall gets past John Davison on the run down into Brooklands. So that puts Nigel, I think, probably into the net lead. Davison Deeks behind. Yes, I think that's the Blue Cobra number 1 into the lead of the race effectively.
Yeah. So Nigel Greensall, final race of I don't know how many races he's done, probably about 63 this weekend. He leads from the Davison Elan. Steve Deeks now in 4th place. There were a couple of cars mingled in there that were not in the lead order early on. Steve Deeks runs out very wide indeed. You told me not to go out over the curbs there at Cops Corner, Steve. What are you doing? Nigel Greensall leads. He has been a bit Nigel Mans, hasn't he? Doing a bit of a Red 5 hero stint. And here is the battle for 4th place, I think. And the blue and white 911 joining in on the act as well. Now that's the first time he's been this far up the sharp end. That's kind of a no, that's not Simon King. Simon King's in the Morgan, and steaming up the inside comes Simon King. There he goes, whizzing by Richard Plant.
I think it's John Williams, the blue Porsche.
Yes.
So he's made up some good ground because he wasn't in the lead group pre the...
No, he was in the next group trying to break away and catch up to the back of them, and in fact that happened, of course, when the safety car came out. Big moment.
Did we get a spin there for...
Yeah, it was either a spin or an absolutely lurid slide collected. I think the 51 car is still just about there. Yes, he is.
That's save of the day then, isn't it?
Oh, isn't that? That was a full wet weather moment in the bone dry. So an enormous moment there, really chasing the throttle, and I think that's just put the frighteners on a little bit. Richard Plant goes up the inside of Simon King. Steve Deeks, 911, and right behind him, did the other part. John Williams started in 9th place, so yeah, he got sort of shuffled back a little bit at the start and lost contact with the lead group, but the safety car brought them back in. Then they went into the pits together, they've come out together. So Nigel Greensall leads from John Davison, and then everybody else is third. Tiniest of touches there from the 911 SC of Steve Deeks. These mid-80s Porsches, the two of them, Steve Deeks and John Williams right behind him.
Lead Morgan in this group just starting to break away, but the other cars all still tied together. The two Porsches and the Morgan at the back, all battling for places in the top 6.
Yeah, Richard Plant had a little bit of a moment, and then in the 51 car, Simon King really scared himself and caught us by surprise. So he's dropped back into 4th place. Steve Deeks in 5th.
But he's coming back.
Yeah, and John Williams has now been passed by the next Morgan in the queue as well. Is that Keith Arlers? It will be, won't it? He was waiting to take over. So that'll be car number 80, I think. Keith Arlers took over from John Shaw. We'll see if it's the checkered helmet when he comes closer to the camera.
Looks like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, the way it's being driven, yeah, it is. The way it's being driven as well has Keith Arlers in a Morgan with his tail up all over it. Steve Deeks has got the same Morgan in both mirrors almost exactly at the same time. Arlers coming down the inside. The battle in front remains King ahead of Plant, and Deeks holds on from Arlers and Williams.
Into club corner they come, so the number 51 Morgan, Simon King, who had that big lurid moment here last time around, manages to keep it in a straight line this time, and has got himself back to the head of that group after losing a place.
Now the lead of Nigel Greensall over John Davison is 6.5 seconds. Davison 7.2 seconds ahead of this group as well, and 7.2 seconds back from here goes down to about 14th place. So this group all covered by about 2.5 seconds, and up the inside comes John Williams, trying to retake the place from Keith Arlers, and Keith Arlers goes, you can't do that to my Morgan because I've got the inside line and the power to pull away from you as well. So there is John Davison's Elan in second, just running over that little bit of easy dry, and then Morgan's, this is King and Plant battling for third. Deeks, the orange Porsche, in 5th, Arlers in 6th in his Morgan, and 7th place is Williams.
Richard Plant gets through there on the run into Brooklands past Simon King, and Steve Deeks certainly hasn't lost touch in the orange Porsche, but we're back with leader Nigel Greensall. We might as well have a standard banner at the bottom of it's Nigel Greensall you're looking at, and then just bring it up for every race.
Yeah, one standard graphic, yeah. There are 2 or 3 drivers, and Nigel Greensall is I think possibly the one who's done more races here than, I was going to say, than everybody else combined, and that's possibly the case. However, so Steve Deeks again got a good run down the straight and out of Copse Corner, down through Maggots and into the Beckett's S's. He needs to keep that speed up. The Morgans are doing a really good job together of staying just out of his reach. So Simon King, Richard Plant in the 51 car, and then Steve Deeks head down and charging in 911. He's really trying to find something different, isn't he? And he might get a little bit of something different from another Porsche. You can see that red 924. That's the next bit of traffic they're going to catch as Simon King just goes onto the racing line ahead of Richard Plant, leaving Plant to deal with the Porsche. And the 924 may just possibly be in the wrong place for these Morgans to really keep their speed up. He tries to stay out of the way, but he's got to turn left there at some stage. So in the number 3 car, and that's a much less modified car, Pete Connell and John Fawkes in their 1979 924. Doesn't help Steve Deeks at all. In fact, actually, Deeks running out a little wide there, had to take a tighter line onto the straight because the 924 was there. Does not lose out to Keith Arles, but did not gain on King and Plant.
Through the section fast corners leading up to the much slower village corner, and a possible move up the inside from Steve Deeks there, but cut off by Richard Plant. But Plant is now closing in on Simon King again, and look at Keith Arles as well, trying to take a tight line, trying to get an overlap on the orange Porsche, and if he does, he'll have a good line down to Brooklands, but that doesn't work out. The Porsche manages to take the position back as they go on to the Wellington Straight, and now it's Morgan versus Morgan, Porsche versus Morgan and Porsche as they come down into Brooklands.
This is where Steve Deeks is going to have to do something. I was just thinking, he's not going to match them on pace. He's going to have to be even braver under braking. He goes the long way around the outside. That 911 chassis helps him around the outside of the Morgan, so he does pick up a place. This is for 3rd, don't forget. Simon King in the 51 Morgan is in 3rd. Now, can the +8 come back against the Porsche down the straight? Certainly, it looks like Richard Plant thinks it can. There's trouble for the 240Z. That was the better of the Datsuns in the race, but Steve Deeks holds on. He is just going to have to do it under braking. He can't do it on the straight. The Morgan's got just enough to stay out of reach. He doesn't have any power advantage. He's got to make something happen under braking. And maybe in the Beckett's S's, and he just overruns going in very deep. But again, right behind him, John Williams goes diving past Keith Arles. Can't handle it over the grass. What's coming? What's coming? Around he goes, and did he clip Arles there coming back on? He did.
Yeah,
clipped him coming back on in reverse. He was looking behind him to see what was happening, and Keith Arles, the unfortunate victim there, because of course straight across the grass is a shorter line than the actual racetrack, and so he covered that ground more quickly. Lost it here, John Williams, onto the grass, and the car breaks away. Now watch Keith Arles, he's on the racetrack, but this car is not slowing down on what is still wet grass, and just clips the rear wing of Keith Arles' car. You see it's broken the rear light and just dinged that rear wing, but just enough to come right on the edge of adhesion, just to tip Arles into a spin.
And another 6 inches further forward and it would have hit Arles in the wheel, and that would have probably been a retirement, but hopefully Keith will get away with that.
Another couple of hundredths of a second later, he would have just whistled past behind him as well. So, yeah, fortunate but also unfortunate. Kevin Kuglocken started it. Nigel Greensall has picked up the running in the number 1 Cobra. 7.5 minutes remaining. He's 7.5, make that 8.5 seconds in front now. And he's starting to ease away. Fastest lap of the race, 2 minutes 24.3 to this car. Nigel now relaxing into 2:28.3 last time round. Just enjoying a nice summery drive in an open top sports car. Nothing to write home about.
Got his sunglasses on as well.
Yeah,
and,
he had the shades ready a couple of races ago, didn't he? Because he knew that the sun was going to be getting low. Just a little handout of the cockpit to the Elan driver to say thank you for staying online and giving me the chance to go by without having to second guess where you were off to.
Through the Beckett's sweepers, the centre section, then the right-hander, and lovely to be able to see Nigel at work in the cockpit. Just takes a little bit of curb there, bounces the car, and MGA in trouble.
Yeah.
That's the 29 car of Steve and Jack Smith.
1500 rather than the twin cam, and there is the lead gap. Not that Lotus Elan with a silver bumper. That is our pole sitter John Davison. He said, well, normally I got swamped at the start, go back to about 6th place. He didn't drop that far back, but he did get swamped by a couple of cars. Just 2 cars making an early pit stop, none of them among our front runners. So a couple of penalties to be applied post-race, nothing that will disturb our lead order. bellow of the Morgan's V8, but you can hear the way it's torturing its tyres as well. These cars running on treaded road tyres, not on slicks.
And the E-Type at the head of the picture that we're seeing, Adam Bagnall, he actually tows his caravan to the circuit. I think he may take the tow bar off for racing. It probably wouldn't be very safe to have a tow bar stuck out the back, but he uses that car to tow his caravan.
Well, first used to come racing here at Silverstone in the historic races. There was an ex-Tazio Nuvolari Alfa Romeo P3 Grand Prix car. It had never been repainted. It was so covered in oil over the years that the red was almost black, but it drove all the time with a frame on the back of it that clearly carried the 2 spare wheels, as well as had the tow hitch for the caravan. That's how you go historic racing. Again, as you say, at different times, you're probably not allowed to have a tow bar on now for safety reasons. John Williams on the grass again. Just a spin and a half there. This Porsche is definitely having a rough ride this afternoon.
I was just hoping he wouldn't collect Adam Bagnall then, because that
I'm sure Adam Bagnall was as well, yes. Yeah.
I do wonder whether that's what happened in that quite big incident early on, whether a car spun across that grass and actually came across onto the track again.
Yeah, quite possible. I mean, the Lotus looked like it had been hit hard by an unguided missile, and there was quite a lot of damage on the Datsun, wasn't there? So
yes.
I think that is entirely possible. Somebody losing it either in front of you or actually possibly behind you, and coming at speed across the grass in a way you couldn't manage. Lotus Europa coming by here. You don't see many of those these days. In fact, you never really did in period even, but the Lotus Europa, such a distinctive car. However, even the charms of Emma Peel driving one didn't really do a great deal for Europa sales. It was designed to replace the Elan and be a more family-friendly car, but it really quite caught fire the way the Lotus Elan did. Good to see them out though. Twin-cam engine, of course, mounted behind the driver rather than in front, so the rear-engined revolution that Lotus was part of the pioneer of in Formula One came about a decade later to its road cars.
Just over 3 minutes remaining in the race, and Nigel Greensall has, before him Kevin Kiviloken has driven this Cobra beautifully. Oh dear, another Elan off the track, which is the number 22 car, Nigel Armstrong, Robert Blakemore's S4 1970 Elan, and I was we got a quick shot of the number 124 Datsun. In fact, there it is. So that was Dave Jarman, who we saw semi-retired, as it were, at the side of the track, but glad to see he's got going again.
Yeah, third in his class, or he was, before John Williams went off. So John Williams has dropped down the order, and leading class, was John Williams leading class D? Now I think it's Philip House in car number 5, and 124, I think, in second place. That is John Williams just behind, isn't it?
Yep, you've just changed on the timing screen.
The timing screen is a day or two out of date in terms of John Williams' gyrations, at least. Philip House leading in the Escort RS2000. That's the car in red and gold, the Alaman Racing livery. Here is our race leader then. There will be one more lap for him after this one, as he heads out of Cops Corner, off down towards Maggots and the Beckett's S's. Maggots, this little left-hander, and then into what was once just the right-hander at Beckett's and then the left-hander at the Chapel Curve, but that was added complexity as the Beckett's S's were created, and a fine set of challenging corners that has been greatly appreciated, I think, by everybody that's raced it. Coming down towards the camera, you can see the 1800 Marcos, another couple of Morgans. As you said, we've got plus 8s, the 8-cylinder cars, and plus 4s. Was that a flat Rad Morgan, or was that just a trick of the light? Yeah.
Morgan still manufactured in Pickersleigh Road in Malvern, where it's been for many, many years. It did start life just up the road, which is now actually a retirement home complex, but it's been in Pickersleigh Road for many, many years.
The ill-mannered might say the ideal place to sell Morgans, but I certainly wouldn't subscribe to that. Nigel Grinsell leads onto the last lap from James Davison, John Davison, the man on pole position. Simon King in third place. And there is another of our Datsuns, that's another 260Z. And John Williams still having a battle. He's thoroughly enjoying himself. He's had several battles up and down the order. Now with this Lotus Europa, Jim Dean was going to be driving with Ian Daniels. I think Jim is driving it on his own now. Jim Dean in a 1972 twin-cam Lotus Europa.
And that's actually a change of position there, with John Williams recovering one of the places he lost gyrating.
Now this is the battle for 7th place, with the Bagnall E-Type just ahead of Philip House in the Class D leading Alan Mann liveried Escort RS2000. Now, I don't know if it is a genuine ex-Alan Mann Racing Team car, but that would seem not to be appropriate for road sports, so maybe just a nice looking livery. The Shell Sport banner, it certainly looks the part, whereas the E-Type looks very much like a standard road car, doesn't it? It does look like you'd drive it to the circuit, whereas the Escort possibly doesn't. Philip House dialing in the opposite lock. And time has run out. So we're about to call time on racing at the 2023 Silverstone Festival after 4 days of frantic track action. Testing on Thursday, qualifying throughout Friday, and then 2 long days of exciting racing at the festival comes to its conclusion with the HSCC Road Sports. Kevin Kulocken starting the Cobra from 3rd on the grid. Nigel Grinsell waving thanks again to another car as he goes by, heading towards the checkered flag. Another successful race for Kulocken and the Cobra, and yet another successful race here for Nigel Grinsell. Has probably been in a car almost as long as we've been in the commentary box this weekend, but he's had as much fun at least. Nigel Grinsell, Kevin Kulocken win it. They are triumphant in the road sports. The car that started on pole, John Davison, possibly underestimated his ability to keep up with the field. The big capacity cars in front of him. He takes 2nd place at the line with the headlights ablaze. And it will be Simon King in the number 51 Morgan +8. He is the 3rd different car on the podium. And after being up and down in the battle for 3rd, he eventually broke clear of William and Robert Plant's +8 in 4th place. They come across the line now. And Steve Deeks should be in 5th place. He is indeed in the orange 911. Not repeating myself, that's just the car number. And 6th place, Keith Arlers brings the car across the line. That's the number 80 Morgan. The E-Type will finish in 7th, driven by Adam Bagnall. And that is also in the top class, Class E. John Davison won Class C, by the way, and Phil House in the Larry Escort will win Class D. And we have one other. John Williams takes 10th on the line, having been as high as 5th or 6th and as low as probably 13th or 14th. Takes 10th place on the line in his heavily abused Escort, Porsche. One other class, and that is Class B, and in 24th place at the moment, Roger Whiteside in his Morgan 4.4. So that will be the 4-cylinder, 4-seat version of the Morgan. He will be a car number... I've lost him now, where is he? Car number 64, winner of Class B, and he has taken a checkered flag already because he was a lap behind the leaders. So nobody in Class A, which I'm assuming is the up to 1300cc class. Let me check my notes. Oh, up to 1 litre. Oh, that would be quite entertaining. You could bring a Fiat Cinquecento or a little 1 litre Fiat Abarth, something like that.
Hillman Imp,
yeah, 998. 875, get it bored out, 998. You have 998 Coopers, 999 Coopers. Oh, it could be a really entertaining Tiddler class.
quite as it left the showroom, John Williams' car.
Not quite as it left the collecting area, to be honest with you. The whole point here is they're not quite as they left the showroom. They're prepared for racing with all the safety things you need, full harnesses, proper racing seat, rollover cages, seat belts, fire extinguishers, electric cutouts and so on. But yeah.
Still road legal though.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Nice to see the drivers acknowledging the marshals as they go on their slow down lap.
Yeah.
Thanking them for their efforts over this very long 4-day event.
Yeah, absolutely right. And enjoying a little bit of applause from the crowd as well, I think. Still an awful lot of people here at Silverstone. Luckily it has not either been freezing cold and soaking wet or ridiculously hot and just scalp burningly sunny. So we've had actually some pretty decent weather for motor racing throughout the weekend. So it's exactly the ideal kind of weather to be hanging on here and enjoying all the action. And then, of course, there are the food stands and the drinks vendors who are still very eager, I'm sure, to help you out, keep you stoked up before you go home. Don't forget that the bands will be starting. Actually, the bands will be starting in about 9 minutes. So we might have to rattle through our podia relatively efficiently with Nicola. The final time this weekend, she'll be cajoling the ducks into something resembling a row. And that is it for the racing. Let's take a look at how they finished. The HSCC Road Sports Trophy 40-minute driver change race. Kevin Kudlocken and Nigel Greensall winning the final race of the Silverstone Festival in the Shelby Cobra. John Davison from pole in second place in his Lotus Elan winning his class. Simon King in the Morgan ahead of the Plant Family's car. Steve Deeks, the best Porsche, ahead of Keith Arler's the Flag, who was the second driver of that Morgan. Adam Bagnall in his almost standard E-Type tow car, finishing just inside the top 10 as well, ahead of class winner Philip House. Lots and lots of variety, and I'm afraid a fair number of repair bills, either for cars that mechanically or physically decided not to complete the race, or because of incidents. And yeah, Keith Wyman didn't even get a lap in his Bullet Mustang. A very disappointing end to his weekend. But the race was an absolute cracker, as it promised right from the start. A mixture of small engine, nimble cars versus some bigger, hairier machines. And a couple of early incidents would lead to the safety car coming out for clear-up operations. And that allowed the drivers then to do all of their pit stops. Enormously sideways moment for Simon King, and an irretrievable one for the Lotus Europa. And he wasn't the only Lotus, finding that although Colin Chapman engineered lots of grip, there wasn't quite enough. John Williams over the grass, just clipping the Morgan of Keith Arler's into a spin. Fortunately not too much damage, but out front, after Kevin Kudlocken handed it over to Nigel Greensall, the Cobra remained in the lead. John Williams trying more grass and finding that it was just as ungrippy as the last lot as Greensall raced to victory.